going on this trek that you're doing. How many weeks out are you?
3.
3 weeks. So 5 miles a day between now and then.
No, I'll take it up to 7 next week.
So, I'm impressed, jealous too, because that sounds like a lot of fun.
Okay, guys, here we go.
When you do that, how many weeks does it take you to make that whole trek?
About 3.5.
Last year, you didn't get it finished. Did you ever go back and finish it, or did you?
I went and did some in November.
So yeah, it was blisters or something last year, wasn't it? That
No, the Federal Reserve moved up our trust exam.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was originally scheduled for November, and they said, we're going to be there the first week of October. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it'll be a lot of fun for head off that way. So, I'd like to give it a try. So looks like people are starting to come in, and Kelly's admitting people. Those of you who are I can't tell who all admitted in. So Stacy, I'm sorry, is admitting everybody. I was looking at Kelly's name here. So
You can go ahead and get started, guys.
25 people on the line.
All right. So, well, guys, thank you for everybody who's on here for joining us today. So this is just our third series now in what we've dubbed the Community Cafe, and our idea was just to get 3 professionals on here from different areas that talk about some topics that we thought might be of interest to the community. So the 3 business people represented: Chris Toman with First Option Bank, Mark Roberts with Affinity Asset Management, and myself with the law firm of Stockton Stern. And so we just talk on various topics each week, and hope they're of interest to people going in. So Chris is going to be talking today about the use of trust. And Chris, the name I think you gave the topic when you had brought this up was parenting from the grave, which is a way that, we don't normally think of trust maybe that way, but it certainly is a way that we can, we can control assets and how they're used often after our death, which is kind of what you're doing here. And Chris, tell us a little bit about it. You're the chief trust officer for First Option Bank and Trust. So tell us a little bit about what you do in that role, maybe as a start, and then we'll talk about the trust and the advantages of them today.
Okay. Well, an interesting way to look at that. I have several trust officers that work for me that come from different angles. One is an attorney, and she looks at the legal obligations that we have for a trust. I have another who spends her time dealing with administrative issues. My job in dealing with the beneficiaries and the grantors that we manage assets for is to take a look at what the best interest of the entire family is. And I think invariably when you look at the trust, you're looking at a legal document. But underneath that, what you really have is a relationship between a grantor and a beneficiary, or number of beneficiaries. And really the most typical one that we see is parents, children. And so I'm going to speak for myself. When I take a look at the trust that I have for my children, what I'm looking at doing is making sure that in the event that I am no longer here or capable of looking out for them, for teaching my kids, the values that I want them to be able to use in their life, financial, acumen, taxes, managing assets, managing investments, cash flow, those pieces as well. I want to be able to have a hand in teaching them in the event that I'm no longer here and capable of doing that. And I think invariably when we sit down and we talk to people, and you and I have done that a lot, you and I have sat down with a lot of people and had conversations about their personal relationship that they have with the beneficiaries that they're leaving their money for. In the event something happens to them, what happens to those beneficiaries? And I think, and maybe you can elaborate on this, that there are always underlying issues when a family takes a look at the relationship that they have with their kids. It may be drug and alcohol related. It may be a learning disability. It may be they may be very, very good at what they do, but they may not have the acumen to be able to do the other things that are associated with managing those investment assets. Would you agree with that? Or, I mean, has that been your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we really drill down, and this is what I try to take clients through when we're, figuring out what is the best plan for them when it comes to planning their estate, is, we'll go through after we've talked about, the clients and their health and some situations, we get into the kids and, we're really getting into how do the kids get along? How do they interact together? What are the family dynamics? And so when we explore that, there's a concern. Kids fighting becomes a big concern. And, we all hope that our kids are not going to be those ones that everybody's going to get along. But many of us have seen it in situations where kids that got along before the death of the parents, at the death, there's hurt feelings, there's anger, there's arguing, and all of a sudden, they don't want to get together anymore at Thanksgiving dinner. And so that's one of the beauties of trust, is that, we have the ability to structure that in a way that helps. We can never totally eliminate what other people are going to do, what our kids are going to do, but we can certainly put some parameters in place to try to make certain that our demise is not the cause of the kids, fighting and arguing. So it is one of the big concerns. But other concerns that you kind of touched on, we're worried about the kids, maybe money management, or maybe it's relationship issues. We want to protect assets, in the event of our children go through a divorce, or they face a bankruptcy, or they're sued because they ran somebody over in the parking lot. So, trusts is certainly are a way that we can protect assets from those types of threats when we leave those assets to our kids. So, absolutely. So maybe Chris, talk to us a little bit about, how, and then we get into how you guys kind of do that as trustee, but maybe just overview, how do trusts protect from those types of threats for our beneficiaries when we leave assets to them?
Well, you brought up a very interesting point, and I think it's one worth exploring, and that is that family dynamic, that the feelings get hurt. That interfamily lawsuit is something that really, beginning in 2002, 2003, really started to raise its head. I remember back in the late 90s, it was always, the first recommendation was always to find a family member, a friendly family member that would be able to help minor children, or even children that have reached adulthood, help them with the beginning of that phase. And as we moved into the early aughts after 9/11, we started to see a dynamic blow up where sisters were suing brothers, cousins were suing their cousins, aunts and uncles were getting involved, and the number of interfamily lawsuits and interfamily squabbles just exploded. And I think you even see that when you pick up the newspaper and you read about, Prince has died, and all of a sudden there are 64 different lawsuits, people that feel that they're entitled to something. And I hate to put that on the generation that's coming up, but it's almost like there's a sense of entitlement, like what mom and dad have done and built and are now leaving to their kids, that they're entitled to it, as opposed to that they get to experience, they get to be part of what mom and dad built. And so, when we put the title on this, Parenting from the Grave, what I was really talking about was mom and dad's ability to continue to raise their kids in the event that they're no longer there and capable of doing it themselves. And, as you mentioned, really, you kind of talked about it a little bit last week. There's two different ways to approach estate planning. You've got your typical will planning, and then you have trust. And those are really the two different directions that you can go. And they're philosophically different, but they get to the same place. To me, the trust is the obvious answer, because it allows the parent to create a dynamic for the kids and involve people in helping them with the taxes, with the investments, bring in a financial advisor, have a protector in place to make sure that the kids are taken care of. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely agree with that. I mean, trusts are just fantastic planning vehicles, not only for planning for our death, but planning for our incapacity. So they're fantastic planning, instruments or vehicles to accomplish what we're looking for. Chris, when you talk about that family dynamics aspect of things, oftentimes, I mean, and this is what I see most of the time with families, it doesn't get to the point most of the time where they have lawsuits. What I see much more frequently, a lot of times it's the personality of kids. Maybe there's one child who has a very strong domineering type of personality and another one who's not going to stand up to him. So the domineering child just kind of runs over the other kids when it comes into things. And I've seen that, time and time again where, well, I want this asset. Oh, and the other child just kind of lets it go, let's go. But there's this feelings of hurt. And I hear that when I'm talking to people about doing their estate plan, and they bring up, well, when mom and dad died, my sister just ran over me and she ended up getting everything. She seemed to want everything. And if I wanted something, then she said, well, no, that needs to be sold. And I just got run over. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen with my kids, because they can see that maybe they've got some children that have stronger personalities. So, those types of things that come in, but then your role, and you were talking about, is coming in as that trustee, where as a professional trustee, you guys are able to step in, and now we're not putting any one child in charge of that. Your job is to make sure that mom and dad's wishes, or the person who created this trust, that their wishes are carried out, and you're able to help the people through this. Let me just go, and it is a plug, Chris, for you and your trust company. But I tell clients this all the time, that First Option Bank and Trust is far and away my favorite trust company. There's lots of professional trust companies out there, but I think what you guys just knock it out of the ballpark when it comes to the customer service aspect of thing, and getting to know the clients. Most trust companies, if they even get a copy of the trust, it's stuck in a file and they don't do anything until they start getting paid on things. But where you guys get in and you get to know clients and try to understand those family dynamics and understand really what someone wants to do with their trust. I just think that's a fantastic service that you guys provide. And although while doing it at typically less cost than what the others are charging anyhow once they take over. So you guys do a great job on that. But I think that's what I try to walk people through when they're, once we decide what they want to happen with their assets, how they want it to go to the kids, and how we can use protections, and then who's going to be controlling this, who's going to be managing it, what's it going to be like if we put one of the kids in charge. And there's no right or wrong answers, and I don't know if this is where you were thinking here, but I think people on here would like to hear. So if you guys get involved as trustee, take us a little bit through how you guys, kind of internal workings of handle those relationships and deal with the kids and get the assets to them. So how does that all work?
Well, there are a lot of different points to what you just brought up. So I'm going to try and touch on a few of them. First of all, thank you very much for the nice words that you said. I learned early in my career dealing with a large trust department that a lot of my competition actually views the assets as belonging to them, and that the beneficiaries are nothing more than a legal requirement that they have to deal with. And we're a community bank, and we focus what we do around helping the people in the community, and we're people-centric. So when it comes to the trust department, I believe that carrying that over and having the beneficiaries be the center point of the relationship is what differentiates us from most. So as I take a look at the relationships as we begin to build them, what typically happens is when a trust department receives a copy of documents, they go into a file, sit in a drawer, and they're not touched until somebody passes away, and there's now a legal requirement for them to be involved. We make every effort to create a relationship during the lifetime of the grantor and begin to understand what it is that's important to them in raising their kids, their beneficiaries. How do they want their beneficiaries treated? Because what's right for you and your kids may not be right for me and my kids. And the only way for me to learn that about you is to deal with it during your lifetime. And so we try to create that relationship and begin to have meetings with you and understand what those wishes are, what it is that you're actually asking us to do in the event that you're no longer capable of being involved in the relationship with your kids. The only thing, and it's a long adage, I mean, death and taxes are the only certainty that we have. So the only thing that I know when it comes to my kids, and my son is 22, my daughter is about to turn 21, neither one of them are financially ready to take over and run their lives all by themselves. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't, but that means that they're going to make mistakes. And in the event that me and my wife are no longer here and capable of helping them, I want to make sure that there's somebody there that they can lean on, somebody that I trusted to be able to help them through that as they begin to build that in their lives. So for us, during that lifetime, it's important for us to create the relationship so that we understand what that family dynamic looks like in your eyes, in the grantor's eyes. And we understand what it is that you want for your kids. Because if we just wait, put that document in a drawer and wait for something to happen to you, then invariably we're not going to be able to understand what your take is. You and I have had many conversations about the value of a statement of wishes, right? For those that take the time to put on paper what it is that's important to me in my life, whether it be charitable, whether it be in raising kids, whether it be what do I want for my grandkids, you know, those unknowns that don't exist at this point. And we see every kind of commitment to that document. I have people that will not put anything on paper because it's too difficult to sit down and actually start. I have others that, I mean, on an annual basis, I'll receive a completely updated statement of wishes. And as you know, that's not a legally binding document, but it gives us direction. We begin to understand what it is that people want. You and I've had that conversation. I mean, what do you think of that concept in general?
No, I think it's invaluable that you have that. And what I love for those people that don't get around to writing that statement of wishes, you know, the fact that you guys reach out to them at least annually and you kind of check in and you're having that discussion with them. So you guys are getting notes to formulate that a bit as to, you know, what they want for their beneficiaries. What happens if they become incapacitated? You know, what level of care do they want? What happens at their death? What do they want for the kids? And you guys have that. And I will tell you, you know, when I say you're far and away my favorite trust code, well, part of it is you're the only ones that come in and sit down and people that I see some names on here that have joined us today that have been in those conversations that, you know, you come in, it's either yourself or your guys' in-house attorney who comes in and understands the work and trust with the clients and me sitting there and we have this meeting so you guys know what your role is. I don't know any other trust company does that because you guys aren't getting paid to do that. And you come in and then check in with them on an annual basis. So I think, you know, it's just invaluable because you're able then to make sure that the hopes, dreams, wishes, and aspirations of the client are realized. By doing so, rather than just, I got to pull out the document, hope the document gives you enough direction to do so. So there's a lot more that fills in the blanks here. So Chris, so we talked about that. That's kind of what your role is, and we can do that. Why might people consider using, first of all, let's talk, what a trust, how does a trust help with those things? How does it, when we talk about
question. To me, having that independent third party in place is a very valuable tool, number one. Number two, having somebody that can tell, I hate to say this, I can tell my children no. I would hate to put my son in a position to tell my daughter no in the event that he was left in charge. If my son became the successor trustee of my trust and I left him in charge and my daughter went to him and said, this is what I want, I would hate to put my son in a position to say no to her. That's just not fair to him. He's, like I mentioned, he's 22. He's a senior. Well, he just graduated from KU. He's now in the master's program. Kid is very smart. He is not prepared in life to be able to handle all of the things that will eventually pop up in their own lives. And I think having somebody in place to be able to help them through that process so that they've got the taxes taken care of, help them figure out the best way to borrow money, make sure that they never get stuck in a position with tremendous credit card debt, understand how to manage, when it comes time to buying a house, what are the things that they need to look out for? How do they protect themselves from making those mistakes? Those are the things I want to make sure that my children are helped with. We have cases. I can think of one person, an example is actually a mutual client of ours. He is extremely good at what he does. Manages about $3.5 million worth of rental real estate property. Has a daughter-in-law that is involved in the business, but is involved from she sells real estate, but she understands the real estate piece. He does not want his kids involved in his business in any way, shape, or form. He does not want to put that burden on them. He wants them to be able to participate in the fruits of the labor that he built, but he does not want to put them in a position of being tied to that business. And so, part of that statement of wishes that he has given to me is, this is what I want in the event I'm no longer here and capable of managing that business myself. I die, I get hit by a bus. Here's what I want you to do. Here's how I want that to play out for my kids. And if he put his own kids in charge of that, they would just muddle their way through it and would make tremendous mistakes trying to get to the point where he already knows that he's going to be able to get in the event that he's not there to do it himself. Does that make sense?
It does. One of the things that I talk to clients about, I always tell people, picture a trust like we built the family safe, right? We're building the safe.
I've heard you say that before.
Into the safe, and and then the trustee is the person that has the key. So for the vast majority of trusts that we create, our clients, they create the trust, so it's their safe, and they put their assets into it, and they have the key, right? They're in charge of their own assets, and it's only upon their incapacity or death we have to name who's going to get the key at that, who has access, who's managing those assets in, and that's where you guys come into play. But you're managing the assets. Then let's just say the trust makers, the parents have died. They've left it to their children because that's the most common of what happens. They leave these assets to their children. And let's say they haven't put any handcuffs or restrictions on their kids. Hey, kids, you can do whatever you want with the money. If you want to take it and head to Vegas and think you're going to double the money, you can do so, because we're putting no handcuffs or restrictions on you. So when you have that type of client who doesn't want to parent from the grave necessarily, what are the advantages leaving it in a trust versus just giving it outright distribution to the kids? Talk a little bit about that, because there's huge advantages there.
That's a great question. And actually, I'll throw that back to you in just a second, but let me talk a little bit about it first. The money that you and I have had lots of conversations about this. Irrevocable trust planning, to me, is the most powerful tool that is available to the typical person in protecting assets. Once the money gets into a irrevocable trust form, nobody can get to it without the trustee's permission. Okay. And so go to that example that you've given with no handcuffs, and let's just say that there's two beneficiaries, let's say, daughter and son, and let's make them twins just so we don't have an older one. But maybe for the daughter, she happens to have gone to college, she finds a career, she does extremely well in what she does, and she's single and she's career minded and she wants to go that direction. That money that's left in trust is always protected until she takes it out of this. Once it's removed, once she pulls that out, then it becomes subject to the whims of her creditors. whether it be through lawsuit, whether it be through divorce, whether it be, whatever the case is, anybody can get to that money once it comes out of the trust. But as long as it remains there, then it's protected from those creditors. So if she does get married and then turns around and gets a divorce, those aren't marital assets. That can't be considered. Let's assume for a second that the son happens to get married and gets married to somebody that was married before and maybe has 2 children from a prior marriage. And then they have 2 children. So my own personal view, and that doesn't mean that this is right for everybody, but my own personal view is the money that I built, I would like to be left to my lineage, which means my children, my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. And I love the fact that my son has married somebody that maybe had 2 children from a previous marriage. But in the event they get divorced, I don't want my money to disappear and not go to my grandchildren. Then they happen to go, part of that money goes back and goes to my son's ex-wife's kids. And so for me, that protection, I still have the ability to distribute money to the kids for any reason. You've put no handcuffs on me. Daughter wants to take $200,000 out to put a down payment on a boat that she's going to live in San Francisco Harbor. Great, we can distribute that $200,000 right now. But if she doesn't want to take it out, she wants that money protected, it can't be subject to her creditors. I mean, and you as an attorney probably see a lot more cases of that, but probably 90% of what we do is protecting our kids from, people trying to get to the money that they've got.
Mark Roberts, who's, with Affinity Asset Management, the other third of this community cafe, he used the analogy, and I love his analogy when he talked about that when the kids inherit it, it's like a tube of toothpaste, right? Inside that tube of toothpaste, it's protected. It's divorce protected, bankruptcy protected, IRS protected. None of those parties can get to it except the trustee, right? So you have the ability to access it for the kids. It's for their benefit, but none of these people can get to it. But once they take it out of the tube of toothpaste, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. And when Mark said that, I said that makes a lot of sense. So, I've used that analogy many times. I'll give credit back to
pretty smart guy.
But you're right. So and that's one of the big mistakes I see, Chris, is a lot of people, clients will bring trusts that they've had created previously. Before I had a relationship with them, they were drafted up by other attorneys, and the vast majority of them call for outright distribution at the death of the trust makers, at the death of the parents. It just calls for outright distribution to kids. I'm always like, why would we do that? Even if you don't want to put handcuffs and restrictions on your kids, when you leave it to them in this continuing trust, it is a powerful asset protection tool. It provides those divorce protections and creditor protection, all those things. Why would we not want to take advantage of it? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure when we put a plan together that our assets go to who we want, when we want, the way we want. And we want to provide as much protection as we can. And it's very, very rare that I'm having a client who would say, I don't want to provide this. I just want to have outright distribution. Maybe if it were a real small amount. But having the protections of those trusts are vital. So what your role then, if you come in and whether there's restrictions on the kids or there's none, you've had a chance to review the trust, what the parents were, you've met with them prior to, so you know how that money is being distributed to the kids. What is that relationship with you and your trust company typically like with the beneficiaries after the passing of the trust makers?
That varies. We have beneficiaries that we meet with on a quarterly basis. We have beneficiaries that we talk to on an annual basis. I've got one for an irrevocable trust that I probably talk to one of the 2 kids at least weekly. It varies. We have others that, they get their annual distributions and that's all that they really want. They want to make sure that the assets are growing and are protected the way that they're supposed to be, that taxes are being taken care of, but they really don't look for anything from the trust. So again, going back to the conversation about why a community bank versus a bigger trust company, I believe that our job is to take care of the people. Yes, we're supposed to take care of the assets. Yes, we're supposed to administer the trust. But to me, our biggest role is taking care of the people. I got a question for you, and this we're at 8:29, so this will probably be our final question. If somebody out there is actually thinking about beginning their estate planning right now, and are listening to this conversation and listened to you last week talk about the different documents involved, how do they get started in this process? What is the first thing that they should do?
It starts with that, initial, what I call strategy session, where we really jump in and roll up our sleeves and dive in and try to, we've got to identify the threats that are out there. And we talk about family dynamics and assets and all that to really figure out what the best plan, because while, you and I are both huge believers of trust and the powers they provide, I don't think either one of us, I'm not one that believes everybody has to have a trust. I always tell people, don't overcomplicate, keep it simple, but make sure we're comprehensive. So trusts are a fantastic way of doing it. So it's just setting that, make the call, whether it's with me, with another attorney, but get an attorney who understands this stuff and, start the process. And if we keep to that adage of don't overcomplicate it, keep it simple, it's not that hard of a process.
Well,
Chris,
I've sat down with you enough times and with other attorneys to understand your role in that and how you deal with people. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
well, Chris, we are up at our 8:30 mark. Thank you for your time today. I'm not sure what our topic next week. We're going to do these every Wednesday at 8 a.m. And this was our third time of getting together. I'm not sure. I think it may be you and Mark next week, Mark Roberts, that are talking. I'm not real sure what the topic is, but guys, thank you everybody for joining in with us here today. Chris, thank you for your time and for everything you do. As I said, you guys knock it out of the ballpark with that. So I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon. And everybody, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate you, Glenn.